Through the generous contribution of Dr. Lewis's family, we're very fortunate to be able to share with you these timeless recordings of Dr. M. W. Lewis, a self-realized American yogi. Dr. Lewis was Paramahansa Yogananda's first American disciple and dearest personal friend. The wisdom Dr. Lewis imparts through these teachings will give you a dynamic and practical insight into the ancient science of yoga as taught by Paramahansa Yogananda. This lecture's title is Food, Fasting, and Fads, and was delivered in San Diego, California on May 16, 1954.
The subject this morning, food, fasting, and fads, seems a little strange to such a wonderful spiritual service, but there's one thing which I would like to point out is this. The Master once said to me, he said, remember, he said, this vehicle which you have is the only vehicle you'll have to find God. And so if we look at it that way, I think perhaps the subject is more in keeping for Sunday morning. I'll say at this time that in a few minutes I'll try to just give you some highlights on a subject which I know can be discussed up to even 2 hours. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to try. But I will say this, that those of you who wish to leave are perfectly welcome to do so. I know the time has run over quite a bit, and yet there are others who have come here just to perhaps find out something about food and fasting and fads. So please feel free to leave, if you will, quietly, and I'll just try and give you a few highlights on the subject of food, fasting, and fads. One basic rule we should remember, and this rule comes from Sri Yukteswarji himself. The basic rule is this, that the food should be natural, vital, and non-irritating. That's an important thing. Natural food, vital food, non-irritating. Now, some people, we all know that raw food is very vitalizing. And yet some people cannot handle it. And so the Sri Yukteswarji in his wisdom said, be sure you can handle the food, whatever food that you can handle, a natural food, without upsetting your digestion. If it upsets your digestion, you will not assimilate it. That should be your natural food. He also made some observations that unless the nursing mother received in her diet vegetables, grains, and fruits, milk was not produced for the offspring. And so he concluded from his work in the Holy Science that various grains, fruits, roots, and for a beverage, milk, and water that exposed to the sunlight was the best natural food for man. It is easily digested and assimilated. That's the important thing. Now you take milk, for instance, sometimes it's hard to digest. That seems strange, it is so. And I remember the Master said, take a little bit of it, spread it out throughout the day and chew it well. Then you can handle it. So we must use the reason and the common sense which we have in this matter of diet. Fried foods. You know, fried foods are not good. They're hard to digest. The fat molecule is hard to break down. And yet we eat fried foods and then we feel it. And yet we keep on. We must be reasonable and take those non-irritating foods. That's an important point, which Sri Yukteswarji brought out. A food that you can handle. And then you will have less trouble. In his own words, he said this about diet. His advice to students was as follows. Any simple diet which provides what you need, a natural diet, suited to one's constitution, is the right one. Because one man's food is another man's poison, without question of a doubt. Each one of us is different. And so we must remember that in food. to take those non-irritating foods, natural if possible, natural vital food, and keeping away from the heavy proteins, as I will come to in just a moment. To live, we have to have proteins, carbohydrates, fats, mineral salts, water, and nowadays vitamins, because the food is so unnatural. The Master often warned that vegetarians must be careful to get enough protein. That's the important thing. Get enough protein. That's why a vegetarian diet augmented by dairy products seems to be the best, and which the Master recommended. Well, people say, well, now, you look at the cow. Cow in the field forms a great big body from eating grass. But who wants to be a cow? To eat all the time. To get that protein, you'd have to eat a cartload of grass. And I have even seen the cows eating at night. They eat all the time. So we must be careful not to be lax in the amount of protein which we get. That's very important. Very important to vegetarians. Now, proteins. There's one important thing I want to point out about protein. There are two kinds of proteins, flesh proteins plus dairy products. And the sad thing is that flesh proteins give the greatest amount of protein